Baker Mayfield to the Broncos. That's what we're diving into on the diehard mailbag today. Question coming in from Mile High Sign says, if Baker Mayfield is available, the Broncos should sign him. Everything is pointing at the Broncos drafting a quarterback and releasing Russell Wilson. I think Baker would be a perfect system quarterback for Sean and a great bridge quarterback. Todd, do you agree?
No, I don't think so. I think he had a great year. I think it was good, but I don't know if he's going to be who we need. I think we tried it with Case Keenum, another quarterback, which I love, had a good year, tried to bring him over, it didn't really work. I feel like this situation would kind of work out similar to that. So for those reasons, probably don't want Baker.
No, Case Keenum's a great call because they do play kind of similarly too. Like it's kind of like the under center, almost West Coasty type of offense, like the old school where it's like the play action, bootleg, that sort of stuff. Get him on the move a little bit, like let him make something happen, but it isn't necessarily like pick you apart from the pocket, which is more of what we think of when we think of Sean Payton. I could see it just because, it seems like the Broncos couldn't spend the money, but the Saints were in a much worse situation than the Broncos are last year, and they still found a way to sign Derek Carr. So not that Sean Payton was a part of that, but those are his people who made that call. So I don't think the money would stop them, even if it probably should. But I don't think it's a perfect fit, and I do think they would probably be a bad idea.
Baker Mayfield is a stock that fluctuates like crazy. We've seen it throughout his entire career. He's high, then low, then high, then low. Right now, you'd be buying him at his highest, pretty much knowing that he's going to come back down. Maybe he'll come back up, though. His rookie season, great. 27 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. For a rookie, sign me up. His next year, he comes back, 22 touchdowns, 21 interceptions. Awful year. The next year, he bounces back, 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Russell Wilson numbers this exact same year. Then the next year, he has a struggling year. 17 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. 2 years ago, 10 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, so he actually dipped low twice in a row. Then last year, he bounced back up, 28 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. You're crazy if you think that he's just going to stay at a very good level throughout the rest of his career, because he's proven it that he's going to go back down. And so right now, you'd be buying a very fluctuating stock at its high price. I'd be okay with Baker as a stopgap quarterback. He's not going to be paid like that, though. Yeah. I think he's going to get at least $25 million on a 2-year deal. So 2 years, $50 million. I wouldn't even be surprised if he gets $30 million. So that's not really the stopgap quarterback you want, like a high-paid quarterback, and it would be a really high-paid quarterback because you're coupling that with Russell Wilson dead cap. Then you're paying, $65 million to your starting quarterback for a guy that is likely going to dip again?
Yeah, the reason we get the stopgap quarterback is to have money to go out and build other pieces of the team. You don't get him and then have no money to move and get some quality pieces to when you do have your quarterback, you have the team to facilitate, Super Bowl run. Like, just puts us in more of a hole. I don't know if it makes sense. It's a no for me.
I do think quarterbacks right now peak around like 30, 31-ish. He'll be 29 to start next season. So
wait, who peaks around 30, 31?
I think that those, like, you look at like Stafford. I think Goff is finally like kind of at his best. I think you look back at like Peyton, Brady even was later than that.
Oh, you're saying
just
peak and then they continue to be great.
Exactly.
They don't just peak and fall off.
Maybe even the peak is actually like 33.
They become the
34.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's kind of like you climb up there, and then peak actually might be a little bit later. But I think that as a quarterback, you have to look at like the fluctuations and be a little bit concerned. At the same time, though, you have a bad year as a 25-year-old with Freddie Kitchens as your head coach. It's not the end of the world. Another little fun thing to look at. He was 9-8 with the Bucs this year. A great team with a great roster. Mike Evans. That defense is insane. Year before, Tom Brady had an 8-9 record with the exact same team.
I wouldn't. It's a really interesting point. I wouldn't hate Baker on the Broncos. I think he would work better with Sean. But I agree with you, Todd. Just the price for what you actually want to get out of him doesn't really add up for the Broncos. They need to go all in on their next quarterback, not like half of the way in. And I feel like they'd be going more than just half of the way in on Baker in a way that you wouldn't be getting that return.
In a different world,
You can't wait. Time out. You can't compare the 2 seasons with Baker. That's like comparing Trevor Simeon's first year and Peyton Manning's last year. Like, of course, Trev had better. Like, that doesn't speak to him as a quarterback.
I love that. But we talked about on the podcast a little bit today. You brought up the $80 million that the Texans have to spend. If the Broncos were in like that sort of situation, but they don't have a CJ Stroud, like they still do have a question mark. They still need a quarterback, but have that sort of cap space, have a good team. Then sure. Give them the 2 years, $25 million. That's a good use of money when you have money to spend. Broncos don't have money to spend. So you're kind of like, you're going to be paying this bill even after these next 2 years. And that's why it makes it tough, because you're kind of mortgaging the future for what you have right now, plus Baker Mayfield. At that rate, I mean, you could go bring back Russell Wilson and it'll cost you $37 million over 2 years instead of the $50 million over 2 years. I think you might be getting a better quarterback too.
So let's dive into that with the final 303 of this mailbag with the question from Mr. Undrafted. Says, what's the downside to keeping Russell Wilson and actually taking something we need, like another cornerback or defensive tackle in the first round? What do you think would be the best player at pick 12 regardless of position? I can think of one downside to keeping Russ this year. Actually, 2 downsides. The one that jumps out is if you keep Russell Wilson this year, the way his contract is now, you're keeping him next year too.
Yep.
And that is Sean Payton signed a 5-year deal. He does not want to be tied to Russell Wilson for the first 3 years of his deal. So in Sean's eyes, I don't think that's a non-starter. He's not keeping Russ for 2 more years. How Russ comes back is a pay cut, sure. But I think more realistically, the path for Russ coming back is the Broncos saying, we'll pay you $37 million this year. You're going to get the bag. You're likely going to be our starter. But we're going to restructure and push the guaranteed money to 2025. We're going to push that a year down the line. So Russ gets his money, but they don't have to pay him and guarantee him for next year.
I don't know if it's going to work, but
It's fair.
I agree that's the way he comes back. Downside is maybe just the energy and the chemistry between quarterback and head coach, and then also the team in the locker room. I think Russ would try his best to be Mr. Positive and be the guy he was this year or the year before. This team's going to be a little bit different. Guys are going to kind of be on edge. I don't think anybody's going to really be relaxed within their job. Just so the dynamic is probably the biggest downside, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, and then before the season, my take was they need to make the playoffs this year, as in like last year, in order for them to be on track with Russell Wilson, because he's getting to the point where he's probably not going to be getting much better. And so if you want to look at what they had, if you went back to last year and they get a wild card spot, they lose in the first round, at least they're in the playoffs, and you can say, next year we can be better. We can build up a little bit around him. We can hope that he stays about the same, and then maybe win a playoff game, maybe win a couple playoff games, the next year maybe say, like, this is our year to win a championship. It's just tough to look at Russell Wilson right now and say he's going to win a championship with the Broncos in his career.
Well, he peaked 4 years ago.
Exactly. And so it's just tough to see them like leveling up to the point that he can be the leader, he can be on that team. And so if he's not going to be on that team, it just leaves you in a tough spot. And so the downside to me is that he isn't going to be the guy who wins you a Super Bowl. He could be like, maybe, to take a really sad example, you're Alex Smith, who kind of sets things up for Patrick Mahomes. But even for him to be the Alex Smith leading this team to the playoffs a couple times, setting things up for a young quarterback who then has like a good team built around him, he would need to improve, and the rest of the team would need to improve, and it's just tough to see that trajectory working out that way. So that's a downside to me. But again, every plan, any path that they could take has a very serious downside, and that's just the case of being in an 8-9 football team.
Okay, final thing to round us out. Best position if it's not quarterback for the Broncos to take at 12.
Tight end.
Yeah, if Brock Bowers is there, that's awesome. I look around, I like the receivers. You could have Neighbors, you could have Odunze. Those guys would be awesome. The tackles, opens things up. You could shift things around with like Bowles, maybe McGlinchey. And then he brought up defensive tackle too. Jerzon Newton's a freak. Tavondre Sweat's a freak. Maybe a little bit rich at 12. They'd be awesome. Of course, corner Terry and Arnold. Terry and Arnold would be awesome.
Build from the inside out. Something offensive line, defensive line. Corner would be the ultimate luxury piece for me. That'd be so juicy, but no, start from the inside out. All right, that's our weekly mailbag. Drop your questions over at thednvr.com on this mailbag that we've got over there. So make sure to find it on the podcast side of things. Drop your question for next week. We want to get to as many as we can. Thanks for rolling with us.